Hello, beautiful child of God. Welcome back to the boring country life that I am intentionally living at the present time. I am your host, Joyful Jessie, and in today's video, we're going to take a long tour around our garden, and then we'll have a chit-chat later while I fix lunch. As I finish up harvesting some lettuce for our taco salad, let me tell you my joyful news for this week. I have fallen in love with watermelon. It's true, born and raised in the South. Other than a couple years that we spent in Hawaii when my mom was in the military, I have hated watermelon since my youth. But as I've grown a garden, I've learned to like lots of new fruits and vegetables. So every year, I try watermelon again, a few bites each summer just to see if my taste buds have changed. And this was the year. 2024 is the year that I fell in love with watermelon. Welcome to Friday, August the 2nd. Now that all the morning sweaty work is completed and I've finished breakfast, I came out and harvested some salad, greens, and lettuces to get ready for lunch later on today. I thought while I was out here I would let you look around and see what's growing in the garden, beginning of August. Wall bed 1 is all sweet potatoes. I put between 10 and 12 sweet potato slips in the bed here, and it's growing like crazy, as you can see. And as the greens grow down the sides of the wall, I just come along and clip them with scissors so that the chickens can enjoy the greens from that. Wall bed 2 and 3 down at the corner are all cauliflower. I planted robber cauliflower, I think was the name here, and then self-blanching cauliflower at the other end. I do have shade cloth on them. The walls tend to get hotter faster and stay hotter longer than the ground beds. And we've been in the 90s for the last few days and will be for a few more days. So I have the shade cloth to help keep the soil a little cooler there. I did plant 2 rows of cauliflower and I planted them kind of thick, and there's some spots where the seeds have come up and some spots where they haven't. So when the 90-degree days are gone, I'm going to go through and transplant some of the plants just to fill in where there's any empty spots. This was wall bed 4. Earlier in the summer, this was watermelon. I have a refrigerator and a living room floor filled with watermelon from those plants. But this week we cleaned out what was left of those plants, and I added some more compost and a little bit of fertilizer, like a 118 chicken poo. And I had put broccoli seeds in here. Maybe a little late. I could have started broccoli seeds indoors. It just wasn't part of my game plan this summer. So whatever comes up, I will also redistribute as needed, like the cauliflower, and hopefully we'll get some broccoli early fall. Strawberries in wall bed 5. Wall bed 6 here is where I was harvesting the salad bowl mix earlier. Wall bed 7 has my second round of green beans. I do have enough stored for the next year or so, so whatever comes from here will be fresh eating, and maybe one more batch of quarts of green beans, but I'll be happy with just fresh eating from these. This is wall bed number 8. This is my second planting of zucchini. My first planting was destroyed by the squash bugs, and later on in the season I find the squash bugs are just a lot less pressure. So I can start my squash plants, and while the bugs are still out, still making babies, they don't seem to be able to harm the plants as quickly. So hopefully I will get more than 1 zucchini off of these plants. I only got 1 from the 3 plants that I had earlier this spring because they died so quickly. But these are just huge. They're almost like having elephant ears. Zucchini. And wall bed 9 here has our second planting of watermelon, so we can get a late summer watermelon harvest. I did 5 mounds of watermelon in this wall, and I will let them spread out and grow how they like, and hopefully we'll get some more watermelon before summer's over. Wall bed 10 had spinach earlier this year, and this morning I came out and filled the beds nicely with compost and a little 118 slow release chicken poo. And I've put in a little more than half the bed is the regular Blue Curls Scotch kale, and then I did 2 rows of some kind of purple kale. just to give it a try. Why not? So that'll be harvesting in the fall. And wall bed 11 here had cucumbers that were taken out this week, and now it's got, let's see, I put the Bloomsdale longstanding in the first 3 rows, and the next 3 rows I did American spinach. So all in there, it's got Bloomsdale longstanding and American spinach. We can do some compare and contrast and see which one of those I like better for the fall. So the sunflower blocks the path a little. I have to move it every time I want to walk in there. You'll notice we need some mowing as I take you around the garden today, or at least some weed eating. Wall bed 12, the first part here is all strawberries, and here is the asparagus, but the fencing is working great, or the trellising, whatever you want to call it, the netting. It's keeping the asparagus up, so I have no problem walking here. I do it every day or every other day just to get to all those Roma tomatoes down there for harvesting. Let's go in the garden. I placed 6 Roma tomato plants in the bottom corner of wall bed 12, and they have been producing like crazy. I am really glad this worked out this year. Last year my Romas did pretty bad. I had a lot in the ground and only a few on the wall, and I overplanted them in the wall last year, and it was very hard to harvest. And they also got mixed in with some indeterminate tomatoes, which made it even more challenging to harvest. But the Romas this year are doing great. The nice part about having them elevated is I can see up underneath in the plants pretty easy to be able to find the tomatoes that are hiding on the inside. So wall bed 13 has the small pumpkins. I left 3 mounds in here of the original 6 that I planted. They've come up great. And I'm thinking I will probably let them spill over and cover this bed for fall. '15 and 16 are empty right now. They are going to have spinach in a few more weeks. And wall bed 17 is more strawberries. All of my strawberries here are everbearing. And 1 bundle of basil plants. Wall bed 18 has 2 sage plants in it. I'm going to come out and put some lettuce seeds in here before today's over because we're going to get a lot of rain this weekend. I didn't water any of the seeds that I put in this morning because we're expecting so much rain this weekend. I'm going to let that work for me for the next few days. Now on to the beds in the ground. This is ground bed 1. This was a test run of some squash from seeds that I saved from last year when we ate our last spaghetti squash. This spring I saved the seeds from it and put them in the ground just to see what would happen. And as you can see, these are not coming up spaghetti squash. Obviously they cross-pollinated. Looking more like pumpkins. But there's a spaghetti squash. So I'm not sure, I guess some of the pollination made spaghetti squash and some made pumpkins. Ground bed 2 has cucumbers for late summer going up the trellis and actual spaghetti squash seeds from a packet in the ground. So cucumbers and spaghetti squash. Ground bed 3 just has zinnias, which I've been trying to cut out and starting to get rid of, and a spaghetti squash on the end, or vegetable squash is another name that goes by. So I'm going to be cutting these out the rest of the way when I'm ready to give out the pretty flowers so that the spaghetti squash can just grow across the bed there. Same thing with ground bed 4. I have pink zinnias, and there's a vegetable or spaghetti squash right back there. So I hope to let that take over that bed when I get rid of these flowers. Ground bed 5 has seeds from the very same plant, the very same spaghetti squash that we ate this spring. And all of these look like they're coming up like spaghetti squash. I don't see any pumpkin looking plants in here. These have been a little more tortured by the squash bugs. They've also been tortured by the lawnmower because some of the vines have come out into the lawn and I've just chopped them up with the mower, which tears the plants around a little bit. But more spaghetti squash still. Ground bed 6 has purple zinnias and 2 more spaghetti squash. Ground bed 7 has 7 and 8 have the same thing. The trellis on both sides have the Trail of Tears black beans on them. I always named them wrong. Cherokee Trail of Tears black beans. So the trellis in the back part was started about 2 weeks sooner than the beans in the front. So they've gone up pretty high. I told you they are very happy to climb. These vines are, and it makes a really pretty covering over an archway. So if you want quick growing greens to cover an archway, I would highly recommend the Cherokee Trail of Tears black beans. And then in the beds, more spaghetti squash. Spaghetti squash. And I even have a spaghetti squash tucked in down here. Right here. With the black beans. So it's technically 2 of the 3 sisters, right? Squash and beans. Now, ground bed 10 and 11 are my largest ground beds, so I can do bulk crops if I want to in them. So I've got dahlias and echinacea at the end. I ripped out a volunteer tomato plant that was here, and I'm leaving it for the children to carry to the chickens. And this morning I put in 3 different types of carrot seeds. I did the Scarlet Nantes, I don't know how to say it. Scarlet's there, Danvers, 2-row Danvers in the middle, and then 1 row of Danvers half longs on the end. I seeded them pretty lightly. We'll see how they come up. Again, I'm not watering them. I'm going to let the rain do it this weekend. Once they get wet, I will keep them watered. Hey, this is 1 hour later since my phone overheated. Hopefully it's cooled off enough now to finish this tour. Now, this morning when I was working, after I did all the seed planting and soil amending, I did a really heavy harvest on the tomato plants. So you shouldn't see any really ripe tomatoes on the plants. I think I'm seeing one right in there I should pick. I don't come out and do any harvesting on Sabbath, so I like to pick pretty heavy on Friday. Also, there's going to be a lot of rain this weekend, which means your tomatoes have a better chance of splitting if they get a lot of rain all of a sudden, especially, in the summer when it's been dry. So you're not going to see any ripe tomatoes. Hopefully, if you help me spot some, I will take them in. This part of wall bed 10 has the beefsteak tomatoes. There are 9 tomato plants in here, 3 rows of 3. And so the middle plant in the row of 3 is tucked in pretty tight, but I've got really good airflow between the rows, and they are producing like crazy. So there's a little bit of a terrace with the wall there, but they're easily 7 feet tall and just so full of tomatoes. I've already canned, let me think, 76 quarts of tomatoes so far this year, either tomato sauce or just diced tomatoes. Hoping to get to at least 100. Shouldn't be a problem. I've also given away hundreds of tomatoes, no less than 200 now, to friends and family and strangers. I was passing them out when I was in town on Monday for an appointment. Now, here are the peppers in wall bed 10. I grabbed a yellow bell pepper off this plant this morning. That one's ripening up nicely. And I also have already grabbed 2 or 3 pimento peppers. And I will actually use some today to make cheesy sauce to go with our Sabbath lunch tomorrow. Let's take a look. See how big these pimentos are. That's a nice one. It's kind of shady, so it's hard to see. But these are loaded. Hoping to get my year's worth of pimento peppers. This is a paprika. I've already gotten 2 or 3 paprikas off this pepper plant. I think over there, that's an orange bell pepper. We'll see when it ripens. And so here are the beefsteaks from the other side. And ground bed 11 right now is corn and pinto beans. So in the spring it was broccoli, potatoes, and peas. When the broccoli and potatoes came out, I was able to put in a late planting of corn. So this should give us a harvest before fall, before it gets too cold. And the pinto beans are loving the trellis wall and reaching up over top of it. And of course, another pear from the Three Sisters. I did not put squash in this bed. I just have so much elsewhere. I have space down here at the end for it, but I think it's a little late. If I have too much broccoli in the wall, I might put broccoli transplants down here. So there's the corn and pinto beans from this side. My last calendula plant, a dahlia. There's some purslane I'm letting grow, and then that's empty. And there is basil mixed in among the beefsteak tomato plants there. There's another look at the pinto beans from that side next to the corn. So that's ground bed 10. There's some trash. And ground bed 11. So we start out with 2 cherry tomato plants in the beginning. And I'm going to tell you a secret. I am not even picking these cherry tomato plants. I am so busy with the rest of the tomatoes. I have not been picking these. So come on over, grab some cherry tomatoes. Further down the line on ground bed 11, we have a rose tomato plant here, the Thornburn terracottas. Now it was the first time for me to plant these 2 types of tomatoes this year. They were delicious, by the way, the rose tomato and the Thornburn terracotta, delicious. But the plants did not hold up very well as far as disease resistance, especially compared to all the other tomato plants I have. So I probably won't be planting these again unless I just have some extra seeds that I want to get rid of in a future year. I plan on ripping these plants and cages out sometime in August, starting to get this bed ready because this fall this bed is going to be filled with garlic for next year. So down this far is the Thornburn. And then from this point on, it was supposed to be Romas, but there's 1 or 2 indeterminate tomato plants that got mixed in there as well. And here's one more fall planting of cucumbers. I thought I would use that empty tomato trellis just to see if I can get the cucumbers to vine up that. But more Romas, a few basil, a dahlia at the end. Doing great, producing like crazy. A little more disease on this plant. Maybe it's the whole row that's struggling a little more with disease than the rest of the rows, but still giving me tomatoes. My ground bed 12 is Bonnie Best all the way down, and the last 2 are Purple Cherokee. Purple Cherokee. They split so easy. That was the thing with the Thornburns too. They split really easy. This has been the best Bonnie Best year I've had in 3 or 4 years. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm not pruning it all this year. The last 3 years, year 7, 8, and 9 of me, 8, 9, and 10. This is my 11th year growing tomatoes. Years 8, 9, and 10, I pruned all my tomato plants really heavily, and they suffered so bad. And I said, this year, forget it. I'm not pruning. And I've had more tomatoes and healthier plants than ever. Of course, by August in Virginia, you're gonna start seeing the disease or something you can do to avoid that. But the plant keeps growing faster than the disease can overtake it. So it's getting brown on the bottom of the plants, but the tops are still green, they're still flowering, they're still putting out plenty of fruit. Ground bed 13, I've got 2 strawberry towers at the end, and the large pumpkin squash. I have 3 different mounds in the front of the bed here, just hoping and planning for it to trellis down the bed. And then further down, ground bed 13 are the Dad's Sunset tomatoes. These are on a single 4x8 cattle panel, as well as that end over there. There's 2 4x8 cattle panels with Golden Jubilees on them. And other than the other varieties, the Thornburns and the Rose, just, being small and splitting easy, the plants on these trellises, these 4x8 cattle panels, have done the worst, I think, because they were overcrowded and they didn't get good enough airflow compared to the ones that are in the cages. Those have been producing, well, actually, these have been producing really well, but I would say I've thrown away at least 20 tomatoes that have blossom end rot. Maybe 30 from these 2 sections. So these tomatoes are huge. Dad's Sunset. Can you see how big that is? It just took a while for them to get past the blossom end rot stage. What I've noticed about blossom end rot over the years is usually the first tomato on each plant has it. And after that, they're all fine. But these that have been on these trellises have probably had 3 to 4 tomatoes with blossom end rot on them before the tomatoes were fine. And it wasn't really easy for me to tell which plant per se the blossom end rot was coming from because they are planted so close together and they intertwine so much on the panels. And ground bed 14 are the Golden Jubilees. So Dad's Sunset, Golden Jubilee, lovely orange tomatoes. With lots of basil plants intermixed. This has been giving me terrific orange cherry tomatoes, but I've also stopped picking them because they're hardly worth my time when I'm busy collecting all the larger tomatoes. The kids can come out and eat these whenever they want. And the dahlia and tomato at this end are growing, but this tomato is not as healthy and strong as the other ones. So there you go. Maybe don't plant your dahlias with tomatoes by accident. Welcome back to my kitchen. Today I am making a taco salad to go with our lunch, and this version of taco salad my mother-in-law came up with. She is always trying out new recipes, and I am always reaping the benefits of getting to eat them once she knows they taste good. This is a salad that we usually only eat seasonally because it's something that I can use up lots of my goodies from the garden with. So the base for this salad is lettuce, tomatoes, onions, anything else you want to throw in there that you like to eat in a fresh salad. If you happen to be alarmed at how I'm wielding my kitchen knife, I am also. Knives and I were not very good friends. I'm not any kind of master chef. I don't get along with knives. Don't trust me with one, but I do have to use them pretty often. I make do. I might look like I'm being reckless, but I promise no fingers were chopped off during the making of this taco salad. I have really enjoyed watching almost all of the presentations that were aired on YouTube from the ASI convention over this past week that was held in Orlando, Florida. If you're not familiar, ASI stands for Adventist Laymen's Services and Industries. And something struck me after the last message Saturday evening that was given by the doctor who is an orthopedic, and he's been doing lots of work in Haiti. And I said to my husband, I said, man, hearing about, the missionaries that are doing all these great things overseas, it really makes you feel kind of small. That may not be how you feel after hearing those kinds of messages, but I tend to be the kind of person that overdoes everything. And I generally don't commit to something unless I know I can do it all the way, I can give it my all, do the best I can, and finish it. And throughout my 40 plus years, especially since becoming an adult, I overdo things. I overwork myself a lot because of that feeling like, oh, I need to do more. And I know that some of you feel that way, that you need to be doing more, because I see a lot of women out there that are way overworked, overtired, overstressed. And I know it's because you're doing too much. Now, what's too much for one woman might not be too much for another. But for me, when I look back, I can see that beyond being a wife and helping run our family business and raising children and homeschooling children, I had a lot more things tacked on me that I was having to balance and multitask all the time. A teacher and a head treasurer at church. For 3 years, I did a home party plan. For another 3 years, I operated a community food pantry through our church. I started it, organized it, and ran it. And to be clear, no one put any of that work on me. They were all things that I was interested in and wanted to do and enjoyed doing. But towards the end of the 3 years of running that food pantry, I felt a call on my heart to walk away from it, to close it down. And that doesn't happen quickly. When people come to depend on you for that service, it took a good 6 to 7 months to completely shut down that food pantry. But I felt a call on my heart that I was doing too much, and I was actually neglecting my first and main priority and calling, which was as a wife and mother. I do believe that we are all given different gifts and capabilities and energy levels. And maybe some people can do multitasking and do it really well. But I realized after trying it for nearly 2 decades that I wasn't actually good at it. There was always something lacking and suffering because I was giving a whole lot of energy to do 1 or 2 things really well. And everything else on my list was being done in kind of a mediocre fashion, completely unintentionally though. Even though I've had a good 2 years now of reining in my focus and keeping it on wife, family, home life, I still feel a pull to keep busy. And I know a lot of that probably has to do with trauma-related things from childhood and things that I probably need to have more counseling about. But I constantly have to catch myself from trying to add more to my schedule because I know it's going to compromise what my real priorities are if I add more. And so I circle back to what were beautiful messages that we got to enjoy listening to from the ASI convention, and how the last one left me with a feeling like I wasn't doing enough. And my husband, when I shared that with him, he had the most peaceful response that he could have. He said, the reason those people share their testimonies and their messages are not for you to compare your lives to them or to bring discouragement. What they're wanting to do is inspire the people that are listening and encourage them. And that's similar to what you do when you're sharing your gardening videos and what your garden's doing on YouTube. You're not looking for someone to compare themselves to you or to discourage someone if all they're growing in is an 8-inch pot on their back deck. You just want to inspire and encourage people that are also gardening or want to garden. Don't you just love wise husbands? I love mine. If there's anything that I've learned, especially through the experience of raising children, is that life never stays the same for long. As soon as you get used to a pattern, something changes. So while I may get to enjoy the boring country life, these days, I know that it won't always be that way. And so I'm resting up now, like Paul, before he became Paul, between Saul and Paul. Was it 2 or 3 years he spent studying God's word and getting to know the Creator really well? And Moses, he spent 40 years herding sheep, getting to know God really well, getting to know his word. So during this time of peace, however short it may be, that's what I'm doing. I'm laboring in the garden. I'm laboring with my children. Because after all, a mother is the highest missionary field there is, If I can raise my children well, then an evangelist doesn't have to do a work to reach them. My hope and prayer for you is that you make the time and space to seek God and to seek His will in your life, and that you don't get caught up in the comparing game with other people. You don't get caught up in other people's expectations. If that is something you struggle with, I suggest reading the book Boundaries by Henry Cloud. But I pray that you find contentment and joy in following the Lord one day at a time as He gives you each day of your life. As we come to the end of the taco salad preparations, let me tell you the simple recipe for it. Now, I usually double recipes so that I have leftovers. So if you wanted to just do a smaller batch, it would be 4 cups of lettuce, 1 tomato, half an onion. I had tiny onions, so you could use onion greens if you wanted instead. And then I used avocado mayonnaise. I believe it would be a 1/4 cup for that size recipe, and about a tablespoon of taco seasoning, whatever you like. If you like it spicier, do a tablespoon and a half. I ended up adding another tomato in here. There just wasn't enough tomatoes in the mix for me. And I forgot to mention the beans that I used were kidney beans. I had cooked these the day before, and then I drained them before I put them into the salad mix, and they were not spiced at all. And if you want to add some crunch to your taco salad, grab a bag of chips that you like. We have loved these Trader Joe's chips, but I'm getting to the point where I'm avoiding everything with canola oil in it. And these do say that they could have canola oil, so they're basically limited to only taco salads as far as when we eat them now. But crunch them up in the bag. That's a lot easier than trying to crunch them up once they're in the salad. And only put them in the salad if you're going to eat it all right then, because the chips get soggy because of the mayonnaise. So since I made enough of this for 2 different meals, I went ahead and stored the taco salad in the refrigerator that was going to be for another day without the chips mixed in. And then I added the chips to what we were going to eat that day with our lunch. Everyone chose to make a different sandwich to go with their taco salad. I opted for peanut butter and jelly because I hadn't had that in a long time. It's one of my favorites. Remember to keep following right behind Jesus in His footsteps, because He already knows what's ahead, and you are going to be perfectly prepared for it if He is your guide.